The prison ship floated in the endless dark of space, cold and silent like a grave. Inside its iron walls, hundreds of humans were locked away, prisoners of war, trophies of the alien conquerors. Among them was one man who seemed too ordinary to be noticed, a man the aliens laughed at and ignored. His name was Daniel, and he was only known as the cook. Daniel stood in the kitchen chamber, a place filled with strange smells and sharp smoke. He worked with alien ingredients, grinding roots, slicing fruit, and boiling strange meats. The aliens mocked him every day, saying a human was only good for carrying trays and cutting food. They believed he was harmless, a simple man who knew nothing of war. Daniel's hands moved carefully, holding the long knife with steady grace. The blade flashed under the dim lights as he cut through the alien vegetables. Every slice was neat, every move controlled. But behind his calm eyes, there was something the aliens never saw. Patience, silence, and a dangerous memory of who he once was. When the guards walked past, they barely looked at him. To them, Daniel was not a threat, only a kitchen slave who bowed his head and worked quietly. But other humans, the real prisoners in cells, often stared at him through the bars. They wondered why the cook never spoke, why he never fought. Some even whispered that Daniel had given up. At night, when the alien halls grew silent, Daniel sat alone in the kitchen. He cleaned his tools, polished the knife, and sharpened the edge until it gleamed like silver. The sound of the blade against stone echoed in the stillness. Every stroke whispered of patience. Every spark carried a promise. But no one knew what he was waiting for. The other prisoners whispered among themselves. "We must escape," one said, "but how?" "The guards are too strong," another answered. "We have nothing." They would fall silent then, eyes drifting toward the cook in the kitchen. But Daniel never joined their talk. He only listened, his hands moving, his knife shining. The aliens laughed whenever they saw the humans planning. Pathetic creatures, they hissed in their strange voices. Too weak, too small, too soft. They thought of Daniel as proof of this weakness. A human who chopped vegetables while others rotted in chains. But Daniel's silence was not weakness, it was focus. Every meal he cooked was a mask, every slice of fruit a rehearsal. One night, the alien commander entered the kitchen. He was tall, his skin like green stone, his eyes glowing with pride. He laughed at Daniel, slapped him on the shoulder, and mocked him. "Cook, your hands belong to me. Your knife belongs to me. Even your breath belongs to me." Daniel looked up with calm eyes and said nothing. The commander left, still laughing, never knowing he had walked past a storm waiting to break. The ship groaned as it moved through the stars, carrying both masters and slaves. The humans slept in sorrow, the aliens in arrogance. But in the heart of the kitchen, one man sharpened his blade. Every motion careful, every breath steady. To the aliens, it was only the sound of a cook preparing food. But to Daniel, it was the sound of war being prepared. The knife glimmered in his hands as if it knew its true purpose. It had cut bread, it had cut fruit, but it was made for something else. Daniel's reflection in the blade looked back at him, silent and cold. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, and whispered to himself, "They see me as nothing. That is their mistake." In that silence, a plan was already alive. The guards did not see it, the prisoners did not feel it. But the knife was ready, and so was the cook. Soon, the aliens would learn the truth. The human cook held a knife, but it was not for food. The prison ship never slept. Its engines hummed like the heartbeat of a beast. Cold metal walls held the humans inside, and glowing lights washed their tired faces in pale colors. Every day felt the same, hopeless and long. But something in the air had started to change, and the center of it was the quiet cook. Daniel still worked in the kitchen, his hands steady as always. To the aliens, he was invisible, a background shadow, useful only for meals. But the human prisoners had begun to notice details that others missed. The way Daniel's eyes followed the guards, the way his fingers always touched the knife a little too carefully. It was as if he was memorizing every step, every key, every sound. At night, whispers spread through the cells. One man leaned close to another and said, "The cook watches them. He knows something." A woman whispered back, "Maybe he has a plan. Maybe he is waiting." Hope was dangerous on the ship, yet it crawled back into their voices. Because the cook, the man they had thought broken, was not broken at all. The aliens mocked the humans whenever they heard them talk. "You whisper like rats," they said, "dreaming of freedom you will never taste." They laughed at Daniel most of all. "Your cook sharpens his toy knife," they sneered. "Does he think he can fight us with that?" Daniel did not answer. He never answered. Silence was his shield, patience his weapon. One night, a young prisoner asked him directly, "Why do you never speak? Why do you only sharpen your blade?" Daniel paused, wiping the knife clean, his face calm. He looked at the boy but said nothing, then slid the knife back into its place. The boy frowned, confused, but later he would remember that look. It was not the look of a cook, it was the look of a soldier. The ship's commander grew careless. He believed the humans too weak, too broken to resist. He gave fewer guards to the kitchen, fewer eyes on the prisoners. His arrogance blinded him. And Daniel waited, listening, learning, moving like a shadow through routine. The kitchen became his battlefield long before the first strike. He studied the tools, the chemicals, the storage rooms. Every pot, every bottle, every knife had a second meaning to him. The aliens saw only food and fire, but Daniel saw weapons and traps. The silence of the kitchen was his training ground. Every day, he became sharper, colder, more certain. The prisoners began to trust him without words. When the guards were gone, they shared secret glances with him. A nod here, a small sign there. They were ready, even if they did not know when the moment would come. Daniel gave them no speeches, no promises, but his presence was enough. They felt safer knowing the cook was still watching, still sharpening, still waiting. The aliens could not hear the change, but it was there. Hope had returned, hidden in whispers, carried on quiet breaths. It was fragile, but it grew stronger each day, and Daniel fed it, not with words, but with action. Every slice of the knife was a signal, every polished blade a silent oath. One evening, the commander again entered the kitchen. He was drunk on alien wine, laughing, his steps heavy. He picked up a piece of human bread from the table and threw it to the ground. "You are less than animals," he roared. "Your cook serves us like a pet." The guards laughed. The prisoners turned their faces away. But Daniel only looked down at the fallen bread. His hand rested on the knife for one brief second, then let go. Not yet, he thought. Not yet. The commander never noticed the fire in Daniel's eyes. He turned and left, his laughter echoing through the halls. But one of the prisoners saw it. She whispered later to the others, "The cook is waiting for something. I swear it." And they all believed her, because deep down, they felt it too. The ship was still a cage, still a nightmare of steel. But in the dark, a plan was alive. The cook was not a servant, not a slave, not broken. He was patient, silent, and dangerous. And the knife, always shining in his hands, was waiting with him. Soon, the aliens would learn their mistake. They thought the cook was harmless, but he was sharpening more than a blade. He was sharpening the moment when everything would change. The alien prison ship floated in silence, moving through endless black space. Inside, life followed the same rhythm, guards mocking humans, prisoners whispering, and the cook slicing food in silence. But beneath this routine, something sharp was waiting, something the aliens did not see, and would never understand until it was too late. Daniel worked in the kitchen that night, the knife glimmering in his hand. He cut the strange alien fruit, their juices dripping like glowing blood on the table. Around him, the kitchen smelled of smoke, bitter oils, and salt from faraway worlds. The guards outside laughed, paying no attention. To them, the human cook was as harmless as a fly buzzing in a jar. But Daniel's eyes were not on the food. They followed the door, the shadows, the sounds of alien boots echoing in the hall. He had been waiting, sharpening both his blade and his patience. Now, the moment was close. Close enough that his heart beat slower instead of faster. Like a predator ready to strike. That night, one alien commander walked in alone. He was tall and heavy, his armor shining with dull metal plates. He carried himself with arrogance, his face twisted in a smirk. "Cook," he barked, "bring me something fresh, something quick." Daniel bowed his head and obeyed, his hands moving smoothly. He placed fruit and meat on the table, slicing with care. The alien commander yawned and turned his back, mocking without fear. That was his mistake. Daniel's knife flashed, faster than thought. A clean arc cut across the alien's throat. The commander gasped, clutching his neck as glowing blood spilled onto the table. His body collapsed with a heavy thud, shaking the floor. For the first time in months, Daniel spoke, his voice low, steady, cold. "You should never have turned your back on me." The alien's eyes flickered with confusion as life left them. To the rest of the ship, it was a quiet night, but inside the kitchen, the war had already begun. Daniel wiped the blade. Calm, precise. He dragged the body behind the storage crates, hiding it among the sacks of alien grain. Then he searched the armor. A small device, glowing faintly, a keycard. Daniel slipped it into his pocket, his eyes steady. The door to freedom was now in his hand. The guards outside smelled nothing, heard nothing. They laughed and joked, never knowing their commander was already dead. Daniel continued his cooking, the sound of his knife against the board covering the silence of murder. To anyone listening, it was only the sound of food being prepared. But in truth, it was the sound of rebellion being born. Later, when the meal was ready, Daniel carried the tray out as if nothing had changed. The guards barely glanced at him, too bored to care. They took their food and mocked him as always. "Move faster, human," one sneered, "or we will feed you to the waste pit." Daniel gave no reply, only lowered his head. But behind his calm eyes, he was already imagining their deaths. Each one, step by step, just as he had imagined the commanders. When he returned to the kitchen, he locked the door quietly. The body was hidden, the blood cleaned, the knife sharpened again. Daniel leaned against the table and breathed slowly. For the first time in months, the weight of chains felt lighter. He had drawn the first blood, and nothing would stop him now. In the cells nearby, the human prisoners still whispered in fear. They did not know what had happened, but something felt different. The air seemed sharper, more alive. Some said they had heard a faint thud, others swore they smelled smoke. None of them knew the truth, that the cook had just killed their first oppressor. But they would soon find out. Daniel sat in silence, his knife resting on the table beside the stolen keycard. The blade reflected his tired face, the face of a man who had waited long enough. His eyes burned with cold fire, steady and unshaken. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow I take the next step. The ship still hummed with the rhythm of slavery, but that rhythm was already broken. Because the cook was no longer only cutting food. He was cutting open the path to war. The alien prison ship drifted through the stars as if nothing had changed. Guards marched in the halls, prisoners whispered in their cells, and the cook moved silently in the kitchen. But beneath the surface, a storm had begun, hidden in blood and shadows. The commander's body lay cold in the grain sacks, unseen, forgotten, yet his death was the spark Daniel had been waiting for. The knife was no longer just a tool for food, it was a promise. And the keycard in Daniel's pocket was the first door to freedom. He studied it, turning it in his hand, memorizing its glow. One small card, one small chance, but enough. Daniel had learned long ago that wars did not start with armies. They started with one act of defiance. That night, while the guards laughed outside, Daniel searched the storage shelves. Bottles of alien oil, powder sacks, strange liquids that hissed when mixed. To the aliens, they were only cooking supplies, but to him, they were weapons. He moved carefully, pouring drops into hidden bowls, sealing jars with cloth. His hands worked with the precision of a soldier, not a cook. Every bottle became a fire trap, every bag of powder a waiting explosion. The next day, the kitchen filled with smoke from boiling pots. Guards passed by, wrinkling their noses, but none dared enter. They trusted the cook to prepare their meals, blind to the danger in their own food hall. Daniel's face showed nothing, his movements calm and slow. But inside, he counted the steps, the minutes, the doors. He was drawing a map in his mind, a map of fire. When the ship's evening alarm rang, Daniel was ready. He placed one of the jars behind the heating vent. Another he left near the food storage pipes. A third, carefully hidden under the guard table. No one noticed, not the prisoners, not the guards, not the arrogant aliens who laughed at their slaves. The ship's own supplies were now Daniel's weapons. Later that night, the silence of the halls was broken. A sudden blast shook the floor, echoing like thunder through the metal walls. Guards shouted in alarm, running toward the kitchen. Smoke poured out, black and choking. Flames licked the ceiling, dancing red against the silver pipes. The aliens roared in confusion, their pride burning with their supplies. Inside the smoke, Daniel moved like a shadow. His knife flashed once, twice, cutting down two guards who stumbled blindly through the fire. He caught the keys from their belts, slipping them into his pocket beside the stolen card. The humans in the cells heard the chaos, pressing their faces to the bars. "What's happening?" They whispered. "Is it real? Is it freedom?" But no answer came, only the echo of fire and screams. Daniel pushed through the smoke, his eyes sharp, his body steady. He unlocked the first cell with the keycard, the door sliding open with a hiss. The prisoners gasped when they saw him standing there, knife in hand, firelight dancing on his face. "It's the cook," one whispered in disbelief. "The cook is freeing us." Daniel said nothing, only handed the knife to the nearest man. The blade passed from hand to hand, a spark of courage in the dark. More doors opened, more humans freed. They coughed through the smoke, eyes wide with fear and hope. Daniel led them through the hall, his steps silent, his mind sharp. Behind them, the fire spread faster, smoke crawling through the vents. The aliens shouted orders, but confusion filled their ranks. They had never imagined their slaves would rise, never imagined a cook would strike first. The humans followed Daniel without question. He moved with purpose, every turn calculated, every step deliberate. Some held pipes, others carried rocks, but all looked to him. The man who had sharpened his knife in silence was now sharpening their courage. In the fire-lit halls of the prison ship, the rebellion had begun. For the first time, the humans were not whispering. They were moving, fighting, breathing freedom into their lungs. And Daniel, silent as ever, stood at the front, the keycard glowing in his hand. The cook had set the ship on fire, and with it, the chains of his people. The fire spread through the prison ship like a living beast. Alarms screamed, red lights flashed, and the smell of burning oil filled every hall. The aliens shouted in panic, running from one side of the ship to the other. But in the chaos, the humans began to move as one, following the silent cook. Daniel led them through the smoke, his steps steady, his eyes sharp. He carried the stolen keycard in one hand, the knife in the other. The blade was stained, but it gleamed in the red light like a signal. Every prisoner who saw it felt something rise inside them. Fear turning into courage, weakness turning into fire. The first group of guards blocked their path, weapons raised. The aliens roared, their armor clattering, certain they would crush the slaves. But Daniel moved first, his knife cutting in a swift strike. The guard fell before he could fire, and the humans surged forward. They fought with pipes, chains, and bare fists. Every strike was clumsy but desperate, and the aliens were not prepared for humans who no longer bowed. The battle was brutal, echoing through the ship. Aliens shouted in anger, humans cried out in defiance. Blood stained the steel floor, mixing human red with alien green. When it was over, 3 guards lay dead, and the prisoners stood breathing hard. In Daniel's hand, the knife dripped slowly, a symbol that the impossible was happening. Word spread quickly among the prisoners still locked in cells. "The cook is fighting," they whispered. "The cook is killing them." Eyes that once held only despair now shone with hope. Every unlocked door added more hands, more voices, more fury to the growing rebellion. And with each freed prisoner, Daniel gave them the knife, letting it pass from hand to hand. It was not only a weapon, it was a message. Every human was part of the fight. They moved deeper into the ship, flames chasing them, smoke curling around their faces. Sirens wailed louder, but the humans no longer feared the sound. They had already broken the silence of chains, and nothing could stop them now. The aliens tried to regroup, forming tight lines with their weapons. But their discipline cracked each time the humans charged with wild defiance. For every human that fell, 2 more rose, rage burning brighter than fear. Daniel fought without words, his movements clean, precise, unshaken. He struck only when needed, saving his strength, saving his blade. But the prisoners watched him closely, copying his calm, copying his courage. The cook had become more than a man. He was the knife itself, sharp, unyielding, unstoppable. In one corridor, the rebels stopped, gasping for air, their faces streaked with smoke. A young woman looked at Daniel and asked, "Why do you risk yourself for us?" Daniel looked back, his face unreadable, his voice steady. "Because I am one of you," he said, and then turned away. It was the first time most of them had heard his voice. The words were few, but they struck harder than any speech. The humans rose to their feet again, following him into the fire. Step by step, they pushed through the prison ship. The aliens shouted orders, their commanders furious, but their arrogance had blinded them too long. They had thought humans were weak, that a cook was nothing. Now they were bleeding for their mistake. And the humans carried the knife like a banner, each strike proving they would never kneel again. By the time the fires reached the storage decks, the rebellion had become unstoppable. Dozens of humans marched together, their chains broken, their voices loud. The knife still led the way, held in Daniel's steady hand. Every time it cut, it reminded the aliens of a truth they had forgotten, a truth sharp enough to split steel. A human with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous weapon of all. The rebellion spread through the prison ship like fire through dry wood. Hall after hall was taken, cells burst open, humans armed themselves with scraps, pipes, and fury. The aliens fought back with weapons and armor, but their confidence cracked each time the humans charged. At the center of it all was the cook, his knife flashing in the red emergency lights. Daniel led them through smoke and fire, his steps sure, his eyes hard. He wasted no motion. Every strike from his blade ended a life. Every movement opened a path. The humans followed him without question, for he was more than a leader now. He was proof. Proof that the impossible could be done. Proof that humans could rise. At last they reached the upper decks where the command hall lay. The walls there gleamed brighter, the doors thicker, the guards more alert. Dozens of aliens waited in formation, weapons ready, their commanders shouting orders. "This ends now," the alien roared. "They are slaves, they cannot win." But even as he spoke, his eyes flickered with doubt. For the humans did not look like slaves anymore. Daniel stood at the front, his knife dripping, his face lit by firelight. The prisoners behind him clutched makeshift weapons, their clothes torn, their chains broken. They breathed hard, eyes fierce, but waited for him. For the first time since capture, they felt like soldiers again. Daniel looked at the knife, then at the humans around him, and finally he spoke. "I was a soldier before they called me a cook." The words cut deeper than his blade. Gasps filled the crowd of freed humans, their eyes wide. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of smoke from burning wires. Daniel's voice was calm, steady, but sharp with truth. "They stripped my rank, they locked me here, they gave me this kitchen," he said. "But a soldier does not forget what he is, and I did not forget." The humans straightened, their hearts pounding. Suddenly, every detail of the cook's silence made sense. The way he watched the guards, the way he sharpened the blade, the patience in his eyes. He had not been broken, he had been waiting, and now the wait was over. The aliens sneered at his words, their commander laughing harshly. "A soldier," he mocked. "You are nothing but a kitchen slave." But even as he said it, his voice trembled. Because Daniel did not flinch, did not bow, did not look away. He stepped forward, knife ready, and the humans behind him roared as one. The sound was no longer whispers, it was thunder. The battle exploded in the command hall. Humans rushed forward with chains and pipes, crashing into armored guards. Screams and gunfire filled the air, sparks flying as weapons clashed. Daniel cut through the front lines with the speed of memory, each strike clean, each kill sure. His blade found the gaps in their armor. His body moved like a man trained in war. The aliens staggered, unprepared for the storm they had mocked into being. At the center of the hall, Daniel faced the alien commander. The towering figure raised a plasma blade, glowing with deadly light. "You dare rise against us?" the commander roared. "I will end you myself." Daniel's eyes narrowed, his knife steady. "You already made your mistake," he answered, his voice cold. "You thought I was only a cook." The clash shook the hall, plasma against steel, sparks flying with every strike. The commander swung heavy and fast, his strength monstrous. But Daniel was precise, every movement sharp, every step measured. The humans fought around them, but their eyes kept glancing at the duel. For their hope stood in that fight. Their rebellion lived in the blade of one man. The commander pressed forward, his rage wild. But Daniel moved like flowing water, dodging, striking, cutting small wounds that weakened the alien. Finally, With a swift motion, Daniel's knife pierced the commander's chest. The alien gasped, staring down in disbelief at the simple human blade buried in his body. Daniel leaned close and whispered, his voice like steel, "Never underestimate a human." The commander collapsed, his weapon clattering to the floor. The aliens around him faltered, their formation broken, their courage shattered. The humans roared in triumph, their chains raised like banners. The command hall was theirs, and with it, the ship was nearly free. Daniel stood over the fallen alien, his knife dripping, his chest rising and falling with steady breath. He looked at the freed humans, their faces glowing with fire and hope. And though he said nothing more, they understood. The cook had always been a soldier. And now the truth was revealed. The alien commander's body lay still on the metal floor, his glowing weapon dark beside him. Smoke curled through the command hall, the red alarms still flashing, but the battle cries had gone silent. The humans stood in disbelief, their chains hanging loose in their hands, their eyes fixed on the cook who had led them here. Daniel wiped his knife clean on the fallen commander's armor, his face calm, steady, unreadable. Around him, the freed prisoners caught their breath, their chests rising and falling with exhaustion. They had fought harder than they thought possible, and against all odds, they had won. But the silence that followed victory felt heavy, as if the ship itself waited for what would come next. Daniel looked around the hall, his eyes moving from face to face, seeing the hope burning where despair once lived. The humans began to cheer, their voices rough but loud, echoing through the steel walls. They lifted their broken chains high, shouting in triumph, the sound rolling like thunder through the ship. Some cried, others laughed, but all of them turned toward Daniel. For in their eyes, he was no longer just the quiet cook, no longer the man sharpening his knife in silence. He was the blade that had cut their freedom open. Daniel raised his hand, and slowly the noise faded. He spoke with few words, his voice low but carrying across the hall. "This ship is ours now," he said, "and we will never be slaves again." The humans roared once more, but this time their voices were not just loud, they were united. The rebellion was no longer whispers, it was a storm. They worked quickly, securing the command hall, locking the alien systems. Those who knew machines rushed to the consoles, their fingers shaking but determined. Others guarded the doors with captured weapons, their eyes sharp, their bodies ready. The humans had become more than prisoners, more than survivors. They were soldiers again, an army born in fire. Daniel stood at the center, watching, guiding, silent as always. He did not need to speak much, for his actions had already spoken louder than any words. But deep inside, he felt the weight of what was to come. The fight for this ship was over, but the war beyond its walls was only beginning. In the quiet that followed, Daniel sat in the kitchen once more. The same place where he had cut alien fruit, where he had sharpened his knife night after night. Now the walls smelled of smoke, the tables stained with blood instead of food. He placed the knife on the table before him, its edge dull with battle, its handle worn from his grip. He looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "A knife can cut bread, or it can cut chains." The humans who passed by stopped to listen, their eyes wide, their hearts full, for they understood that the cook had never been only a cook. He was a soldier, yes, but even more, he was proof of what a single human could do when pushed to the edge. And in his silence, they saw the truth. That every human, no matter how small, could become a weapon when freedom called. Outside the ship, the stars burned cold and endless. The rebellion here was only the beginning, a spark in the darkness of the galaxy. But sparks grow into flames, and flames into wildfires. The aliens had thought they captured a cook. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. The ship drifted forward, silent and scarred, carrying not slaves but free men and women. At its heart sat Daniel, the quiet cook, the soldier with a knife. He looked out into the dark, his face calm, his eyes sharp. For he knew this was not the end, it was only the first cut.